Hey guys, this week we are concentrating on living true, and the component of the success path we are focusing on improving is living in the present. So it's right present. There we go. Okay, so many of us have heard about the need to live more in the present, but what does this really mean? Well, there are different levels of being present, but it basically means to be conscious, aware, and in the present with all of your senses. Now, when I talk about senses, I'm talking about, let's just draw a stick man here. Things like, your vision, your hearing, what else? Be your smell. We've got taste, touch, and of course your sixth sense, your intuition, okay? So in other words, your awareness is completely centered on the here and now, okay? The here and now, right there, right in the present moment. It means not dwelling on or thinking about the past, so the past will be over here, nor being anxious or worrying about the future over here. So how is this even relevant, and why is it so important to actually live in the present? Well, it's essential that we live in the present because this is the only moment that really exists, okay? Everything, life, happens in and now. It is simply all we have. As such, both the past, okay, so past, and the future only exist in your mind, okay? All right, only exist in your mind. That's all. The past is gone, meaning it can't be changed. So we can cross that out. Whilst the future, it's not guaranteed. Meaning that we're never sure what direction our life will go. So we can cross that out too. Therefore, if you're not living in the present, then you're simply not living in reality, and with that, you are not living true. But I suppose the real reason why it's important to live in the present is because everything that you truly desire in life, including good health and happiness, exists only in the present. That's why it's called the present. It's a gift, okay? That's what it is. The present moment is a gift. Obviously, the opposite is also true. The more you live in the past and future, then the more you experience fear-based emotions, such as depression and anxiety. For example, you may have regret or guilt about issues related to your past, or you may have genuine worry about possible upcoming issues in your future. In other words, when you're not living in the present moment, you're living in a constant state of stress and background unhappiness. In fact, 90% of the stress that you experience in life comes from your own thinking, which is tied to either the past or future tense. Stress, which affects everything from your motivation, your lifestyle habits, your hormonal balance, and everything else in your life. So now that you know why living in the present is so important, I'm going to show you how to go about doing so. And despite the fundamental importance of living in the present, there seems to be much confusion of how best to do so. But essentially, there are really two main ways to live in the present. And I just want to spend some time talking about each of these ways now. So the first and easier way is to try to live more in the present, which is associated with doing, which will begin to make more sense as we go through. But I've already written it up here. So let's do a diagram. So we've got our past, present, future. And we'll just draw a little stick man here to help us understand this and clip that back in. Okay, so the idea here is to become more fully absorbed in the present moment by shifting our attention away from both the past and the future. So to shift it away from the past and the future, okay? And instead focus on whatever it is we're doing in that moment. In a negative way, so these can both be negative. This includes many of the addiction type behaviors, such as binge eating, which is really common, smoking, drinking, taking drugs, all that kind of not so good stuff. In one sense, this is not so much living in the present so much as it is distracting yourself away from your past or your future. However, in a more positive way, okay, this includes things such as maybe, doing a favorite hobby. Like for me, I love going fishing, or it could be sewing, or doing things like exercising, socializing with friends, spending time with your pets, doing work that you enjoy. It could involve practicing, basic mindfulness or gratitude, or listening to music, or traveling, So basically, it can include anything we are doing where we are focusing our attention on the present entirely, and anything in which we're not multitasking, okay? Attention's going here, attention's going there. It's just focus on the present. So this is the first way to live in the present moment, by becoming fully absorbed and engrossed in whatever it is that we are doing. And this is great as long as we are doing so in a positive way instead of a negative way. With that said, however, and this is where it begins to get interesting, as beneficial as these positive activities are, they only allow us to temporarily access the present moment when we are doing and focusing on them. And so this is where that doing component that I mentioned earlier comes in. And this is because when we stop doing these things, then our mind naturally begins to gravitate back towards the past or the future. And this happens because the ego part of your mind is always subconsciously trying to identify with something from your past or your future to reinforce your identity, which is what you call your I. Okay? And this takes me onto the second way to live in the present moment. Flip that around. And so the second and harder way to live in the present moment is to become one with the present. We've already written it up here. And this is associated with being as opposed to doing. And that will begin to make more sense as we go on. So let's just draw the diagram here. So we've got past, we've got present, and we've got future. We've got our little man again. Our little stick man follows me around everywhere. Okay, so now I say the harder way because unlike the first way, this way requires self-development work, which for many of us can be quite difficult. And there are many different types of self-development work which you can do to help you live more fully in the present, including things such as practicing self-compassion and acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, practicing gratitude, maybe seeing a psychologist and doing things like cognitive behavior therapy, or otherwise known as CBT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, otherwise known as ACT or ACT. Practicing things like yoga and meditation, including doing things like mindfulness too, or counseling, or just general healing and balancing modalities, spirituality. There's so many different things you can do, and these are all things that I encourage. Some are necessary and some are not so necessary, depending upon your current level of awareness and where you're at in your own journey. But I don't want you to stress about any of these things right now, because they're all things that we'll go deeper on in the Heal Yourself attribute of the Holistic 360 program itself. However, with all of that said, the reality is that becoming one with the present, so to speak, is essentially achieved through one overarching factor, and that is through remembering who you really are. And that's also known as self-actualization, which is really the ultimate goal behind all of the different modalities and of all self-development work itself. Okay, draw a big heart here, my little stick man. Working with the heart, self-development work. So the benefit of accessing the present this way is that once you do, then you unintentionally become present in each and every moment of life without having to deliberately try and do so, including by distracting yourself away, from your thoughts. Okay? So 24/7 connected to that present moment. But unfortunately, as life has become increasingly busy, more and more of us seem to have lost focus of who we really are, and with it, our oneness with that present moment. Okay? Sure, we'd like to think we know who we are, but the vast majority of us don't. I'll ask you now, do you know who you really are? I'd like you to just take a moment now to simply reflect on who you really are. And to help you gain even more clarity of who you are, putting all other modalities aside, there is a simple deprogram activity which you can do to help you find out who you really are. Why? So that you can begin to live more fully in the present. And this involves using the process of elimination and writing down all of the things that you're not. Why? Because the best way to become clear on who you really are is first to become clear on who you're not. So please, please, please hit the pause button now and take a moment to do this activity and just jot down your thoughts before we move on. Okay, so welcome back. How did you go? You know, this can be a really tricky task for us to do, especially if we have low self-awareness. So let me give you a few tips of who you aren't. Now, you are not your occupation and or your title. For example, I'm a doctor, I'm a CEO, I'm a teacher. You are not your emotional states. I'm happy, I'm sad. You're not your behaviors. I'm a yo-yo dieter, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a gym junkie. You're not your roles. I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a brother. You're not your body. I'm beautiful, I'm skinny, I'm fat. You're not your age. I'm old, I'm young. Essentially, you are not anything which constitutes your story, so to speak. So let me ask you this. If nothing from your past defines who you are today, then who the heck are you? Let me ask you that again. If nothing from your past defines who you are today, then who are you? Sure, this may sound crazy, because if you are none of these things, then who are you, right? I mean, there's not much left for you to identify with, especially if you can't identify with any of these things that I just mentioned. And that's my point entirely. All you have left to identify with is the present moment. And so the answer to who you are is presence itself, or consciousness. That's it. On a deeper level, living in the present really means to live from a place of wholeness, without any identification with the past or the future. The more conscious you become of who you really are, the less you require anything from your past or your future to enhance your identity. And when you have nothing left to identify with but your own conscious presence, then you automatically begin to live more fully in the present moment. Obviously, with that said, the opposite is also true. By making a conscious choice to live only in the present, which you can use affirmations to help you facilitate this, okay? Then you disallow anything from your past or your future to influence your true nature. In fact, you are never more fully who you are than when you live in the present moment. This is also why so many of us love to get away into nature, be it the ocean or the mountains or anywhere else. It's simply where we find it easiest to be present and away from all the distractions of life. So remember, if you don't live in the present, then you are not only fooling yourself, but also those around you. And you will never achieve peak health and happiness, because instead of living true, you're living in a fictitious reality. Okay? It's fiction. Fiction. not reality. Okay? Fictitious life that you've created for yourself. And one which stress is an everyday part of. One which affects everything you think, say, and do in every single area of your life, including your health, your relationships, your work, your faith, and everything in between. Instead, aim to become increasingly conscious of your true nature, and as you do, you will begin to live more fully in the present. This is a key attribute of living true, and essentially of living a healthier and happier life. It's important to realize that becoming one with the present moment is no easy task. It requires much inner work and self-development. Sure, I've explained the high-level overview of how to become one with and live more fully in the present moment, which is totally invaluable and will save you years and years and years of confusion. However, consuming this content, as opposed to truly understanding and feeling it, that's why I've drawn a little heart here, feeling it, are two different things entirely. So please don't expect to become one with the present moment in a 1-week challenge. And please don't be hard on yourself if you find this a difficult concept to understand. The reality is that most people never become one with the present moment, simply because it's beyond their conscious awareness. Instead, they simply try to become more present whenever possible, which is where we should all start. So, how much of your time is spent living in the present?
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to learn more about the other essential attributes of staying in your best shape. And until next time, watch what you chew, do what you need to do, and always live true.